Morning, peeps. Here we are entering the New Testament, Part 1, Session 6 on sacrifice. Again, I want to just kind of remind you, these first 7 talks are prolegomena. They're kind of like what is necessary to have thought through, the things to have thought through prior to entering this business of the New Testament. And I suggested that the initial questions that we have to think through relate especially in and around to modes of knowing, how we know, relating to knowledge of God coming through the cross, the crucified, seeking to make a case that it was this focus that's at the heart of the New Testament with regard to discussions of atonement, and then trying to show you the power of this in temple imagery in the New Testament. And that when we come to the Bible, we are really coming to a world that's both very foreign to us and way too familiar. And because we misunderstand both the familiarity and the disfamiliarity, we are just going to go along with the voices in our head and how we've been taught how to read the Bible. By our pastors, by books we read, by people like me, idiots like me, rather than allowing the Bible to do what it does, and that is to speak from God. So you see, one of the things that we have to come to terms with immediately is the fact that God does speak through the Bible. The liberal, the progressive, that's thrown out all theories of inspiration and theories of the authority of Scripture. You see, they don't have a place for Scripture. God can't speak to them through the text. They are in the desert of criticism so bad that they're dying of spiritual thirst, and they've got this incredible book, and they don't use it. I remember. I think it was 2007 or 8, and I was in Minneapolis, and I went to a church run by a fairly well-known Christian liberal, fierce critic of Christianity, wrote a book called Jesus Against Christianity. He was running for the state senate at that time. He had a little church, and I went there to do a Bible study, and it was promoted as a Bible study. And on the sign it said, Bible study, Michael Hardin, how Jesus read his Bible. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Go in, they've got a little cafe, and it's next to a little kind of a bookstore area, and then the churches, they're all kind of connected. And so we're in this cafe, and it probably has 60, 70 seats, and filled that thing up. And I got up to start, and I said, okay, open your Bibles. And there's dead silence, and this person raises their hand in the back and said, we don't have any Bibles. We didn't bring Bibles. I said, it was a Bible study. Well, we don't use Bibles in our church. Really? I said, really? So we need some Bibles. So there's a bookstore right there, Christian bookstore. Go see if you can find Bibles. No, there was all kinds of Marcus Borg and Walter Wink and this and that and the other, and Jim Wallace and Brian McLaren, but no Bibles. So they went in the sanctuary. I said, it's got to be Bibles in the sanctuary, right? Well, no Bibles in the sanctuary. Finally, a couple minutes later, as I'm getting ready to go back and teach in utter despair that there's not a damn Bible to be found in this church, some older lady comes out of the kitchen holding a stack of 10 Bibles. Look what I found under the pots and pans in the bottom cupboard in the kitchen. 10 Bibles. If you don't think that the Bible has an absolutely fundamental role to play in revelation, the revelation process, as a Christian, you to use the phrase, you're shit out of luck, Jack. That's the whole problem with liberal Protestantism and liberal Christendom. It's the whole problem with trying to domesticate the Bible that we see over and over and over again in Catholicism and Orthodoxy and Anabaptism. It's just, we are so unwilling to allow God to speak to our condition. We spend so much time justifying our condition. And in this sense, Luther was right. We are the most self-justifying of species. And that insight of Luther's, by the way, dovetails very, very nicely with Renee's understanding of the deceptive power of the victimage mechanism and our own self-deception in that process. So here's what I want to do today. I want to tell you what the explosive secret is here. Secret. Yeah. I mean, it's known. The Girardians are aware of it anyway. And really to help you, as it were, now make these final moves so that when we start our next series of 7 talks and we develop that historical framework, you can begin to see these themes playing themselves out in the apostolic church. How did they know Jesus? Who was this Jesus they knew? What were the implications of it? How did they perceive the implications of it? How did they frame them? How did they talk about them doctrinally, ethically, spiritually, etc.? And that's what we're looking to do. We are looking to enter back into that intellectual experience of the early church. What are they wrestling with? Because what we are doing as a species is we are coming to terms with the fact that no matter how intellectual and scientific and technologically advanced we are still, in every way, a destructive species. People want to separate themselves into good and bad. You know, we're the good people, they're the bad people. But the whole species, as a species, when you look at the earth, we are the self-destructive species. We're just wiping ourselves and everything else out in the process. That's why you need a robust doctrine of original sin, people. But that's for another lesson for another day. What I want to talk to you about today is that at the heart of this business of atonement, at the heart of this thing of the temple, of reality that we've created, is a mechanism. It's a very, very simple mechanism. In Latin, you can use 3 words to describe this mechanism. Do ut des. D-O-U-T-D-E-S. Do ut des. I give that I may receive. It's also known as an economy of exchange. I give something to you because I want something in return. Relationships are all structured around this. You know, we taught our daughters growing up, boys give love to get sex, girls give sex to get love. I mean, that's how it was growing up for us. Of course, now you have to do all the politically correct things and talk about it all right and everything, but you get the general idea, okay? Even if I have the, PC police want to come down on my head on that. I really don't care. Point is, Christmas, gift giving, birthdays, Valentine's Day for couples, these kinds of things. It's life is embedded in this economy of exchange. You exchange your time for a paycheck, the paycheck for cash, cash for goods and services, or now it's all digital, but in the old days, that's how you did it. And all of our life is embedded in this thing of an economy of exchange. Everything. And it's the principle of sacrifice. When anthropology in the 19th century began to develop as a discipline, okay, you always want to, when you look at the emergence of disciplines and how they arose, you have to recognize the extraordinary courage and strong intellect of those that are starting to frame these early disciplines, and anthropology is one of them. And you have these great anthropologists in the latter half of the 19th century, from Sir George Fraser to Marcel and Mauss and Levi-Strauss and others, who are and Freud, who are going to frame theories of religion. And so today, if you take a comparative religions course, you can learn 8 or 9 different theories of religion. You can see how they've developed and they've used pieces of each other and critiqued each other. Well, there's essentially 2 approaches to religion. The first is known as the essentialist approach. Those of you that study, for example, Eliade or Tillich or these kinds of folks, the lot of the 19th century anthropologists were essentialists. They believe that there's this God-shaped hole in the human heart. God exists, and the human's just trying to connect. Okay? In other words, they're presupposing a God. Okay? So the problem with that is, of course, you can't scientifically demonstrate that God exists, so you can't scientifically demonstrate that whole exists, and so your whole anthropological model at that point is talks about self-transcendence, humans trying to transcend, reach the other, bop, 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 and you have all that, kind of, will, in a better form, eventuate in Buber's I thou language, What you have in these essentialists is a presupposition can't be proven. So, following the structural linguistics of Ferdinand de Saussure in France at the turn of the 20th century, theories of religion shifted. I'm just going to try and make this really simple. In kind of the post-60s era, to functionality. Actually, before that, we can go back to Levi-Strauss, I guess. But now it's a question not of what does religion mean, but how's it function? What's its role in culture? What's its role in the human life? And so anthropologists began really examining rituals and very, very carefully, and I mean, this was also true during the 20th century, but it began to become very, very apparent to anthropologists that there was one thing that's ubiquitous in religion, and that's sacrifice. Sacrifice is everywhere. Everywhere in religion you look, you find sacrifice. Everywhere. And that fact kind of had to be accounted for. And, so early on, I mean, if I'm reading Sir George Frazer, right, one of his arguments that's been challenged by Girard is that religious sacrifices were meant to appease the gods. The humans come into awareness from apes, and we're coming into awareness of the fact that there's thunder and lightning and floods and everything. So, we create this thing where we're trying to, appease the gods so that they'll give us, good weather. That's a theory that is now, for my money, been totally discredited. You see, it presumes consciousness prior to religion. And if there's one thing I think that Girard has been able to make fundamentally clear, it's that religion arises non-consciously, that my mimesis is non-conscious, that really what we're doing when we observe the world is we're observing the non-conscious human part of the world. Well, that's what we're looking at. You read the news, it's not the conscious world you're looking at. The world's unconscious. You're just seeing them act out this non-consciousness all the time. People are not really aware or enlightened. They're in the dark. So one of the things Girard did was he re-examined the whole question of sacrifice. And he did that by taking the work in his first book on mimesis. Deceit, Desire, and the Novel was his first book in, I believe, 1962. It was published. And then he would work for 11 years till 1971. I know 62 and 71 don't add up to 11, but you got to remember he's finished publication of Deceit, Desire, and the Novel back in 60, 61, and then by the time it gets published, okay? But for 11 years, Rene works on anthropological theory and connects this to mimesis in his book Violence and the Sacred, which was published in 1972 and hailed as the first atheistic theory of religion. Now, there's a funny story behind that, because the writer from the French periodical Le Monde was asked to review the book, and he did. And it was like mind-blowing. So he called Girard, and he said, "What shall I say about this book?" And Girard said, "Tell him it's the first atheistic theory of religion. It's a theory of religion that doesn't presuppose God. It explains how we created the gods and God concepts, how we created the concepts of transcendence. Humans did. First atheistic theory of religion. So Girard tells the writer that, of course, he puts it in, and it comes out as though the writer wrote it, but actually Renee told him. So Violence and the Sacred. Now, over there on my shelf, I have a complete collection of signed books by Girard, but I've never, ever taken him my Violence and the Sacred because, peeps, it is just absolutely falling apart. I mean, it's a mess. It's a wreck. Coffee stains and everything, So it's the only book of his I never got signed. If you're ever going to read this book, just note the translation's horrid. Every Girardian agrees. Sorry to Mr. Patrick Henry who translated it, but the translation is atrocious. But it's worth reading. It's the first thing I read. It's worth reading, getting into. Unless you're going to like parse and nuance Girard's thought, you don't have to worry about that. I just thought I should put the caveat in there. And you'll have to excuse me for blowing my nose. I've got a bit of a cold. Okay. Here's what Renee observed about sacrifice. He says, I'm sorry, not he. This is me. This is the text that I put up in the Facebook group there. I've printed this text. It comes out of my dissertation. It's 3 pages. I want to, I guess I am stealing from myself. And this is, I'll tell you when I'm quoting Girard. Otherwise, it's me. The human need to deal with violence produces the paradoxical effect of using violence to contain violence. And you all know this from mimetic theory, where you have mimesis spinning out of control in a community, and everybody's becoming more and more alike. And that's the problem. It's not our differences, it's our sameness. It's our sameness. Here we are, we're becoming more and more alike. The need for differentiation is there, and thus we produce the scapegoat over here that we can all put our collective violence on. The scapegoat is just, as John Paul puts it in his book Empire Sacrifice, a flushing mechanism. It's like a toilet. It's where we put our violence, people. Sacrifice is necessary for humanity to survive. It always has been. Without sacrifice, we don't survive as a species. We have to have scapegoats. We always have had to have. We've always had to have those we can put our violence on. So the need to deal with violence produces the paradoxical effect of using violence to contain violence. In Violence and the Sacred, Girard undertakes to detail the process whereby humans, as they evolve, learn to cope with internecine violence. Primary to the de-escalation of violence is the phenomenon of sacrifice, which, quote, this is Renee, is an instrument of prevention in the struggle against violence. Now, please hear me on this. This is very, 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 very important. We only know sacrifice as a species. That's all we know until Christ showed us the way out of this sacrificial way of living, being, thinking, relating. That's what makes the revelation of the gospel and the Trinitarian God so absolutely profound and powerful. Hey, Deanne. Hey, Ellen. Just saw over there. With us, because we only know sacrifice, we need it. It keeps the world going. Look, I don't know how to tell you this, but this market economy we're now in, we've shifted into the technological society, as Elo puts it, and now the market economy. The thing about scapegoats is we're just going to continue grinding them out as a species. The only difference is, particularly because of our awareness since the Holocaust, boom, the Shoah, and the movements that have occurred since then, the feminist movements, liberation movements of all sorts around the world, the civil rights movements, these things, the Me Too, all these movements that come out of this explosion of awareness of the victim, okay? We are now at a place where, we're like God, we're sacrificing right and left. But we always have been. You see, we always have been. This is nothing new. It's not a new phenomenon. It goes back to the earliest days when we're in caves with clubs. Cain and Abel, Romulus and Remus, Tiamat and Marduk. We live mythologically, people. That's the problem with our thinking. We are embedded in the powers and principalities and mythological thinking. And the fact is, when you're embedded in this sacrificial matrix, this do ut des economy of exchange thing, and the gospel comes in and says, now start taking these economies of exchange out of your life one at a time, you begin to realize the path of discipleship is extraordinary, incredible, challenging, beautiful, can be dark. It's a lot of things. But sacrifice is what keeps us going. And so we can't denigrate it. This is something Girard saw, because he was accused of scapegoating the term sacrifice by Schwager. And Girard later realized, without it, we're not here where we're at. We're not who we are as a species. And again, I'm going to blow my nose. I apologize. We need sacrifice. We need it as a species. Christianity was meant to be the faith tradition that helped move the world away from sacrifice. And instead it became another sacrificial religion. But the gospel is doing its work. Okay, it's doing its work. And more people are beginning to see that sacrificial thinking is ugly thinking, deadly thinking. It leads to death and nothing but. This is me. The act of sacrifice functions homeopathically. A little dose of violence. We all go after Uncle Bob. He's the bad guy in the family system. Or we all hate Mr. Trump. Or we all go after Mr. Putin or Mr. Jong-un or whatever his name is there in Korea. We all, a little dose here, violence here. A little dose of violence stops the greater contagion of violence. The only thing that's holding World War III at bay right now on the planet are all these little skirmishes in the Middle East and Africa and the Philippines and other places. Without those skirmishes, wars, you've got a global war on your hands again, okay? Those little skirmishes are functioning globally for us as flushing mechanisms. We call them proxy wars. And now it's become pretty evident that there are real friggin' victims in these proxy wars. I just posted yesterday on Facebook a very sad tale of what's happening right now in Syria. The whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel, kit and caboodle, is an absolute travesty. It's an absolute travesty. And instead, the damn church goes and takes sides. It takes Israel's side, it takes Syria's side, it takes Russia's side, it takes this side, it takes that side, it takes Iran's side, it takes this side, it takes that. I mean, Christianity is so stupid. We're called to be peacemakers, man. To come in, make known the reality of the pain on the ground and seek peace. We don't do that. We take sides and protest. Our most impotent religion, Christianity. Sacrifice as a primordial ritual act does not assume any notion of transcendence or belief in God. It's the ground and cause of the concept. And the way that works, and you know this from my work, is that we project onto the random victim who we're going to put our violence on. We project on them a demon. We demonize them. They're evil. We make them evil. We tell stories and lies about them. We make them evil, so that when the violence, when we're slaughtering them, killing them, and eating them, we're justified in doing it. That's our myth-making process, as Girard puts it. But because we've done this together, we now have community, which out of which comes things like organization, bureaucracy, blah, 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 okay? Everything that structures your life comes right out of these primordial acts. Here, in this act of transferring our own evil onto the victim, we project onto the victim. Now that we've got this wonderful thing here, we're all bloody lips dripping the flesh of the victim, going, "Oh, that was good. Let's cooperate. We can cooperate. This cooperation thing works. It really does. Let's have another go. Who's next?" We go, "Where did this come from, man? We feel good. Where did this good feeling come from? This good feeling must have come from that guy. He must be bigger than we thought. He's powerful. He's powerful. He must be a god." And we divinize our victims. And then we ritualize the process and just keep doing it over and over and over and over and over. The earliest extant evidence we have for kings and kingship is that kings were elevated and became, as a year later or whatever season later, became scapegoats. They were the person was elevated. They could violate all manner of taboos and do all kinds of things as they were king. But then at the end, bang. And if you ever want to read a great story on that, a little novels back in the 70s, I think it was Thomas Tryon's The Harvest King, something to that effect. You see it in the Bacchus, the Bacchanals, that concept of the yeah, anyway, we won't go there. That's all over slasher films. Horror films is what I mean. Okay. For this reason, sacrifice as a ritual act is not about moral distinctions originally. It's not about guilt or sin. In these originary acts of sacrifice, that is, as a species, when we're first doing them, we're first structuring ourselves by them. This is a quote from Renee. There is no question of expiation. Rather, society is seeking to deflect upon a relatively indifferent victim, a sacrificable victim, the violence that would otherwise be vented on its own members, the people it most desires to protect. Okay? That's key. All right? It is sacrifice that produces human consciousness. It is this act together that will produce ritual, which produces organization and bureaucracy and eventually priesthood. It is this ritual that we engage in, and the need to engage in both the projection of evil and the projection of good onto the victim, that will create religion and culture. All of this is who we are as a species. This is our Adam, people. This is our original sin. Okay? We as a species came to consciousness the wrong way. We weren't meant to evolve this way. Creation's evolving just fine. We humans were not meant to evolve the way we have, and our consciousness, our frames of knowing, our modes of knowing, our awareness, all of it is bent. You don't have your good, robust doctrine of original sin here. You're not going to need salvation. You're not going to be able to explain the world around you. I mean, I think it was Rabbi Kushner in his book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? Or perhaps it was Scott Peck, A People to Lie. I forget, a lot of those books mixed up that I read a long time ago, said the real question is not, why is there evil in the world? The real question is, why is there good in the world? Okay? So for you flower children optimists out there, you're wanting to anthropologically make the human being something good. That's not to say that we aren't valuable in the eyes of the Creator, but our whole mode of being is bent. It's bent, it's broken, it's wrong, it's off, it's rancid. Okay? You gotta have that. Oh, John says, so we are engaging in sacrifice whenever we make a victim of another to quell a larger outbreak of violence. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. You think of a family system, and all the mimetic rivalries in a family system, and how it just becomes easy to blame someone in the family system for all the troubles. We do this as nation states. We do this as communities. Groups do it. Churches do it. Synagogues. I mean, it's everywhere. It's endemic to who we are as a species. Crucial to the act of sacrifice is that it's a misunderstood activity. And you have to get this right here, okay? Bob, are we made in the image of God? Depends on how you define image, bro, you know? So you got to go back. How do you define that icon? What is it? What is it? How do you, and do you do it Christologically? Is Jesus the icon of God? Are we made in his image? Bop, 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 bop. Good question. Not for here, though. Good question. My short answer is yes, but we don't see it because when we look at each other, we're just made in the image of each other. That's the problem. We don't see the image of God in each other because we don't exhibit it. It's crucial that sacrifice is a misunderstood activity. That's why there's all the justification of violence you see out there in the churches and in culture and people that, you know, oh, if somebody breaks into my house, I'm going to have a gun, I'm going to shoot him, man. Chances are none of these people will ever be assaulted in their life or need a weapon, but they need their justification so they feel good about themselves. I get it. When you victimize, when groups victimize, they do this non-consciously, okay? So when you read, you know, about these dumbass churches that promote rifles for worship service to bring people in, you also have to forgive them. They're non-conscious. They're completely clueless. I don't know how to tell you this. The human species is clueless. I need to move on, and I don't want to. Well, you can read some other thoughts I have here on sacrifice in this. I want to carry on with some things that I need to do here in the next half hour. One of the things that happens is there's a difference between the order of things and the order of knowing. That is, we've talked about this before, that in that quote from Thistleton in the second lesson, sometimes we walk backwards into knowing, okay? And it's the same thing with you, mimetic theory, the Bible, and Revelation. And you'll pause me for a moment here. Gosh. We've been dealing with the flu in this house. I haven't caught that, but I did get some kind of rhinovirus. Okay. When you have learned to see the Bible this new way through the lens of mimetic theory, the assumption is that mimetic theory is this way of thinking that you impose on the Bible, and that's how you can read it this way. That's how you've learned it. That's the backward process. But in reality, it's the Bible that contains mimetic theory. You're simply learning to read the Bible the way the Bible is meant, can I use that, is meant to be read. Okay? Girard made very, very clear in his researches between 1962 and 1972 that it was the Bible that opened up and made clear the relation between mimesis, sacrifice, scapegoating, and religion and culture. And Violence in the Sacred and the researches that had been done by Girard in Christianity up to that point were going to be one book, and eventually he split it in two, and 6 years later would produce Things Hidden from the Foundation of the World. But he does end up in the last chapter of Violence in the Sacred talking about the Bible. And this brought the Bible back into the mainstream academy. Boom! It was like, here's an academic who was able to say the Bible's really saying something to us. This great piece of literature of Western civilization that the liberals had tossed out completely, Girard brings right back into the center of the conversation in the academy. And that was huge. That was really, really huge. So much so that 7 years later, I think it was around 1985, Robert North gave a Society of Biblical Literature presidential address on Girard and mimetic theory and what this meant. course, all those folks back then really either misunderstood Rene at significant points or really hadn't worked through the implications of the theory. But this is also 1985, and Rene still has 20 years of publishing other books and things. So what Rene said was he discovered mimetic theory in the Bible. And that's why when you go to the Bible, looking at it through this particular lens, you see it everywhere. It's not that you're importing it into the biblical text. It's already there. And when Rene makes the connection that the passion narrative of Jesus, or the gospel, is the science of reading mythology, that is, the function of the New Testament is to teach us how to read other texts, Jewish texts, Greek texts, Roman texts, Babylonian text, Egyptian text. The function of the gospel is to help us see that all of these cultures and all of their stories and all of that is the way they self-identify, have to be read through the light of the gospel, because all of this self-identification is done in mythology at the expense of a hidden victim. By the way, my whole rant against the liberal progressive left this last year has been because their identity politics is grounded in scapegoating the white male. That's just the way it is. They can't get around that. That's what they're doing. They don't want to admit it. They try to justify it every way possible, but that's the reality. That's the problem with progressive Christianity. It's not progressive, it's fucking regressive. They're still stuck back in the Stone Age, man. They don't get it. And they bellyache about the evangelicals and fundamentalists not getting it, and they're the blind leading the blind on the other side. All right. Mimetic theory, that is, this approach to reading the text, is there in the text. It emerges from the text, and it emerges precisely because at the heart of this whole thing that we're doing is blood, violence, sacrifice. And it's all about the way we do relationships, whether with each other or with the divine or with the earth. Okay? As long as we are caught up in do ut des, in giving to get, we don't have the gospel. Now, when you have an economy of exchange and you give to get, okay? So we have an economy of exchange on this page. I'm giving to you hoping to get some financial remuneration. I freely admit that. I get this. I live in a sacrificial economy. But I'm doing something that's very gospel. I'm giving it away freely. I'm just with no expectation, hope, yeah, but no expectation of return. The biblical term for that is charis, grace. There are three words that are interlinked, according to Karl Barth: charis, grace; chara, joy; and Eucharistia, Eucharist, thanksgiving. Charis, grace; chara, joy; Eucharistia, grace, thanksgiving. Grace, the gospel, the character of the Father, is this freely giving one with no expectation of return. Just gives. This kind of a God doesn't exist in the human religion. Okay? All of our gods require sacrifice. All of our gods have expectations. All of our gods have rules and laws. All of our gods, all of them, even the ones that the deists made, the old watchmaker in the sky who created everything, wound it up just to let it go, that one has an expectation that it's going to go. All of our gods are impersonal, SOB, alcoholic, dysfunctional, crazy, sick projections of ourselves into transcendence. All of our gods, every last one of them. The Christian God, and by that I don't mean the Father of Jesus or the Trinity or I mean the Christian God, right and left, is absolutely sacrificial and an absolute tyrant. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Anabaptist, doesn't matter. The atheists know God, that is, their belief in a non-God, is just as tyrannical. They're reacting against the sacrificial God of Christendom, and rightly so, but they lack open awareness. Well, moving on. For us to really begin to read the Bible so that we can open it at any point, any time, anywhere, any translation, anything, it doesn't matter. See, in the long run, it doesn't matter. I'm going to teach you how to read a bad translation good. That's what I'm going to show you how to do. And how to use multiple translations to critique bad translations. Mercy. Germs. Okay. When you read the Bible, you are coming to this text that it's a bloody text, peeps. From the beginning to the end, from Cain and Abel to the writer's robe dipped in blood in the book of the Revelation. The whole thing is about blood. Okay? So to make it out to be about morals, gays, equal rights, whatever, to make it out to be a text of either social righteousness or social justice, I mean, where we take our political platforms and try to align them with the text and get God on our side, that is just all empire-based thinking. The damn progressive Christian out there, every last one of them that does this, they're critiquing empire right and left without realizing they're empire thinkers. Just different types. Okay, they're going, we're not that kind of empire thinker, we're not that kind of empire thinker, we're not that kind of, like Billy Graham, we're not Billy Graham, we're not Franklin Graham, we're not, Mark Driscoll, we're not this, we're not empire thinkers like, Mike Pence, we're not blah, blah. We're not empire thinkers. Yes, you are. You just don't know it. It's just another form. You do the same thing. Your theology's the same, your ethics are the same, your spirituality's the same. It's dead. Geez, don't tell that to all the speakers that wanted to speak at my conference until I criticized their followers, and then they all backed away. Yeah. There's a military term for that. I won't use it. It starts with cluster. Finally, with regard to sacrifice, we believe that in the act of sacrifice, we are knowing God, and we're not. We are knowing Satan. In the act of sacrifice, we do self-transcend. There is something about taking the life of another that changes a human being. You ask any soldier that goes to war, or anyone that's taken a human life, and it's changed them, unless they're one of those very, 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 very small percentage of persons who are literally born with a brain that lacks certain networks, and so they're sociopathic. That we're not talking about that group. The regular person takes a life, it changes them. There's something about that event that is a watershed. And that's why chicken hawks are the worst people on the planet, man. Well, we're going to send our young men and women to war for righteousness and goodness and freedom and democracy. But I don't have to go. I got bone spurs. We just sacrifice our youth. This is John Paul's thesis in Empire of Sacrifice. You've got to read that book, by the way, Empire of Sacrifice. John Paul. He shows how America has absolutely been nothing but a major sacrificial culture. When you read that book, you really realize we are ancient Rome. We're just Stone Age cave persons, slaughtering right and left. We're a slaughterhouse. We're a slaughterhouse, people. You call the United States Chicago in 1880, whatever you want. We're a slaughterhouse. And We're not going to change it by protests and legislation and this and that and the other. Yeah, we'll create awareness with that. That's what that does, but it doesn't change anything. The only real change comes here. One person at a time, changing the way we think. Change the way we think one person at a time and help one person think differently. And that person helps one and that person. That's where the change comes in. The protests, all that stuff, that just raises awareness. But it doesn't change anything. It can't, because all that's still embedded in an economy of exchange. It takes non-sacrificial thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, to really begin to plant the kinds of seeds that create authentic change, real change, healing change. Okay, thanks, Greg. Yeah, John. Yeah, I have a hard time seeing the divine image in very many people myself anymore. Okay, so when we are reading this text, again, we're suspended in this whole motif of sacrifice. We're on this cross. It's a sub-theologia crucis hermeneutic, where we're dealing only with economies of exchange and their destruction. When the Jesus of Luke says, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. And I realize it's a textual variant. Doesn't matter to me. My hermeneutic allows for me to use these things. Some people have way too tight of a hermeneutic. Yeah, they've outgrown the pants of their hermeneutic and the belt doesn't fit anymore. But I can use a textual variant and say the Lord Jesus. So when Jesus says, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, he's absolutely bringing the new in. That's the new. That's the frame that's different. That's the change. That's the orientation. That's the perspective. That's the entry point into the kingdom of God. There's no other entry point. It's not about morality, changing your lifestyle, any of that. It has to do fundamentally with forgiveness, both forgiving the enemy other and choosing to no longer participate in persecution. Okay? So you don't do that. You now have this new way of thinking. Now this non-linear logic. You have new modes of knowing. This is where spirituality becomes paramount. And if you're a progressive and you're still stuck in there, in your liberal criticism, and you've read your Bart Ehrman and this and that and the other, and you think, you're the be all and end all of deconstruction, and nobody has a right to believe anything because you can't find anything to believe. Well, I feel sorry for you. I'm making these videos to help you get out of that, because I led you into the deconstruction process, all you evangelicals and charismatics and fundamentalists, and I'm going to lead you out the other side, okay? Because there is faith, there is hope, there is love, there is church, there is Trinity, there's life, there's healing, there's nurturing, there's compassion, there's mercy, generosity, hospitality. I don't need to carry on. You get it. But it's not going to be found in this desert of criticism, nor is it going to be found in some kind of first naivete. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. That's just pure religion. The deconstruction of religion that we see happening post-Enlightenment is just the mirror opposite of that. It has not lent us anything new. It's not revelation, but it does certainly make us aware of all the problems that we have. It doesn't offer any real solutions, because the only solution that can be found is the only one that deals with the real problem, and that's the gospel, because the real problem is our mimesis, our enlarged brain, and the fact that Homo sapien arises out of Homo religiosus. The thinking human, the thinking ape, arises out of the religious human, the religious ape. Thinking follows religion. It doesn't precede it. Consciousness follows ritual activity. It doesn't precede it. Language follows both of these, because we first learn to symbolize by creating victims that are both demonic and divine. That's the first symbol. A symbol is polyvalent. It's metaphorical. It can have different aspects and meanings. And that's why you can teach a gorilla a vocabulary of 900 words, but if you say the apple of my eye, they have no idea what you're talking about, even though they know what an apple is and they know what an eye is. They don't know the phrase, the apple of my eye. We humans first learn to symbolize with victims from symbols. We create linguistic structures, and myths are just expanded symbols, according to Paul Ricoeur in his book, oh gosh, Not Fallible Man, The Symbolism of Evil. Thank you very much. So what we want to do is we have to first come at this whole coming to the Bible thing Eucharistically, man. We have to come to this thing recognizing that when we come to this text, we are going to participate in mob action. We are the participants in that because we see it in our own life, but we're also recipients of this incredible divine grace, which is then now given to us as a path to walk in discipleship, which is why we have an incarnate God, a human being who had very specific teaching, a very specific way of life, a very specific mode of knowing and being, and we're called to follow Jesus. So if, again, 4 modes of knowing: scripture, reason, tradition, experience, Christologized, of course. In this, we now can have confidence. I don't say certainty, I say confidence. We can have confidence that we are following Jesus. The kind of confidence the progressive doesn't have, the kind of confidence the conservative doesn't have, the confidence that only comes from the Holy Spirit, who is remaking us in the image of Jesus all the time, because we are listening, seeing him, engaging him, and following him. So we become those who are non-sacrificial. And there's a lovely little quote in Reading the Bible with Rene Girard where Steve Barry inquires about the Eucharist, and Rene talks about the Eucharist. And some of you have read this, you know the text I'm referring to, and he talks about the Eucharist as this act of nonviolence. And he says, therefore, when we take the bread, and we should become a little more nonviolent each time we do that. I wish that were the case. It's just we're thinking of it in our human terms. We don't think of it in these flipped divine terms like Paul does in Romans 3:23-26, or the writer of the Gospel of John does with his doppelganger words. We don't see that. We don't flip it. And so our tendency is to try and find a place of revelation within religion, which can't be done. And Karl Barth saw this. This is absolutely at the heart of Karl Barth. You cannot find revelation within religion. It doesn't exist. Although he wants to call Christianity the true religion. I'm willing to go that far, more or less, I think, as Barth expresses it in CD 1-2. But I'm uncomfortable because the fact is it's still sacrificial. And Barth still had vestiges of sacrificial thought in his theology. Which is why I think Girard can help us clear that up, and we can become real Barthians, the best kind, the non-sacrificial kind. All right, so I'm going to leave that here, and I'll look forward to chatting with you next time. And there is, like I said, a little 3-page text in one of the posts where I'm exegeting some of this, and there's more there that you can look at on sacrifice. All right. Until next time, let me wish you all the best. Much love, a good weekend wherever you're at, and thanks for your support, your financial support. It's keeping us afloat. We're barely afloat, but we're afloat. I'm thankful. I'm truly thankful and grateful. If you want to know how to donate, you've got options. You can use PayPal, and my email is michael1517@yahoo.com. If you want to subscribe monthly, I have a Patreon account. You can go there and subscribe for monthly donations. I do pick those up. I'm not putting any content there. All the content is here, but if you want the ease of monthly subscriptions, you can go there. So, hey, man, here's my part of the exchange. Dough, oot days. Well, at least we're honest about it, eh? All right, man. Till another day. Peace and love.